The sound echoed first as a dry, metallic impact, followed by a scream that was more of surprise than immediate pain. Then came the dull thud of a body against the cold concrete of the warehouse. Marco Aurelio, a 42-year-old man known for his quiet, reliable work ethic, was now writhing on the floor at the foot of an aluminum ladder that seemed to have slipped forever from its secure position. His colleagues crowded around, a chorus of worried voices and apprehensive whispers. The supervisor, pale-faced, was already on the phone, his voice trembling, requesting medical help. The scene was the embodiment of a corporate nightmare, the workplace accident. Marco's fall, reportedly from a height of nearly 4 meters, resulted in a severe lumbar disc herniation, an injury he described as a knife constantly stuck in his back, robbing him not only of the ability to carry his boxes, but also of playing with his young children in the garden. The pain etched on his sweaty, drawn face was the image of innocent victimhood. He, the family's breadwinner, the simple man who only wanted an honest day's work, was now broken, physically and emotionally. This was the first image the world saw, that of the injured hero, the symbol of a system that sometimes fails its most dedicated workers. The company, following protocol, initially supported him, paying his initial medical expenses and filing a workers' compensation claim. The seed of the story that would be told in court had been planted on that dirty warehouse floor, watered by the genuine sympathy of his colleagues and the apparent clarity of the facts. Marco became, in those early days, the center of a small local tragedy. Hey, this story is generating some outrage on your side of the screen, isn't it? If so, do me a crucial favor. Comment on which state you're watching from, and what was the moment that most revolted you in this case. That way, I know for sure that you're connected to our mission to bring justice to these fraudsters. And listen to this. 96.3% of people following these investigations are not yet subscribed to the channel. If you're not part of this group, I invite you to subscribe now. It's completely free, and you'll continue to receive the most explosive stories of fraudsters being unmasked, straight to your feed. Also, remember that at the end of this video, you'll find more shocking cases on your screen. But every story has more than one side, and the truth often hides in the shadows that the initial light of commotion cannot illuminate. As Marco began his journey through doctors' offices, physical therapists, and a legal battle that promised to at least financially restore the life he lost, whispers began to emerge. They were almost imperceptible at first, like the background hum of a conveyor belt. Someone commented that Marco, in the weeks leading up to the accident, seemed particularly interested in safety procedures and claims processing times. Another found the almost theatrical way in which he described his constant pain strange whenever a company or insurance representative was nearby. They were fragments, nothing solid, just dust particles floating in the heavy air of the warehouse, which would soon settle to reveal a completely different pattern. The narrative of the fortuitous accident began to develop cracks, small fissures through which insidious doubt began to seep. The image of the broken man on the ground was still powerful, but a new, darker image was waiting in the wings for its turn to enter the scene. The fall wasn't the end of the story. It was just the first act of a much more elaborate play. The legal battle that followed was a war of attrition, fought in austere meeting rooms and through stacks of medical documents. Marco Aurelio, once a man of evident physical strength, now presented himself to the world as a frail figure. His courtroom entrances were choreographed with painful precision. The cautious gait, the soft groan as he sat down, his face clouded with a pain that seemed to transcend the physical and reach the very core of his soul. He was the embodiment of broken resilience. His legal practice, hired with the money he borrowed, he said, painted a heartbreaking picture. The dedicated worker, the breadwinner, whose future was stolen by unsafe equipment and the implicit negligence of a system that prioritized productivity over well-being. The initial medical reports, of course, corroborated his claim. The herniated disc was real, visible on MRIs as silent, brutal evidence. The insurance company, for its part, defended itself with its usual bureaucratic coldness, questioning procedures, suggesting pre-existing conditions, but unable to find the central flaw in Marco's narrative. He was convincing, very convincing, His performance was so flawless that even his own lawyers, in private moments, commented on their client's devastating sincerity. The pressure on the insurer mounted, the threat of an even larger lawsuit for moral damages looming large. And then, the offer came. A settlement. An amount that echoed like a trophy in anyone's mind. $1.2 million. It was a sum capable of buying not only treatment, but a new life, far from that warehouse, far from that pain. For the insurer, it was the cost of closing a complicated case with a ruinous image. For Marco, it was the ultimate reward. He accepted. The agreement was signed with a shaky signature, which everyone interpreted as a final sign of his weakness. The news spread, and Marco Aurelio became, momentarily, a local legend. The little man who had defeated the giant. Victory seemed absolute, a movie-worthy ending. The money landed in his account, the warehouse doors closed on him forever, and a new life, gilded by the suffering he had overcome, supposedly began. But what no one could have imagined was that $1.2 million settlement wasn't the epilogue to his story. It was the bait that would lead to his downfall. Victory, however, has a peculiar flavor, and not everyone at the warehouse swallowed the story easily. The multi-million-dollar settlement didn't calm the waters. On the contrary, it was like throwing a stone into an already murky pond. The previously insignificant whispers grew louder, turning into serious conversations in corners of the cafeteria and in after-hours text messages. What was once a vague doubt became a solidified disbelief. How had a man, supposedly condemned to a life of debilitating pain, managed to retire so comfortably? The first major whisper came from a co-worker, a man named Carl, who was skeptical by nature. He remembered with uneasy clarity a casual conversation a few weeks before the fall. Marco, in a rare moment of lightheartedness, had asked specific questions about the insurance policy terms, about which type of injury would yield the most substantial compensation. At the time, it had sounded like mere curiosity. Now, it sounded like a script. Another colleague, a woman named Sarah who worked in human resources, mentioned to a superior how surprised she was by the number of questions Marco had asked about the fraud investigation processes, as if he were testing the system's limits. These isolated fragments of information weren't evidence. They were barbs. And they began to fit together when the warehouse manager, pressured by the insurance company now reeling from a $1.2 million loss, decided to review security footage from other angles, from cameras not pointing directly at the stairwell. He found nothing at the time of the accident, but a seed had been planted. The feeling was that a crucial piece of the puzzle was missing. The official narrative, now bolstered by a plea bargain, felt like a plaster statue, smooth on the outside, but hollow and fragile on the inside, about to crack and reveal the emptiness at its core. Doubt had become institutionalized, and it had a very clear target: the man who, far from those corridors, was now living his new life financed by his supposed pain. The truth, in cases like this, is rarely uncovered in a flash of detective genius. Often, it's delivered. And that's how it happened. An anonymous, discreet, and returnless package arrived at the insurance company's offices. Inside, a memory card. There was no letter of accusation, no manifesto. Just the raw, silent, and incontrovertible evidence. When investigators plugged that small device into their computers, they were greeted with the fall of Marco Aurelio's mask. The images, captured weeks earlier. After. The agreement being signed and the money deposited were a punch in the gut to the narrative he had so carefully constructed. There he was, not as an invalid, but as a man in full vigor. In one clip, Marco carried heavy boxes of supplies to a steakhouse his cousin had opened. His movements fluid and powerful, without a hint of discomfort. In another, he unloaded a moving truck, lifting heavy furniture with an ease his former warehouse colleagues would have envied. There was even a video, discreetly filmed at a family barbecue, of him playing piggyback with his son on his back, running through the garden, and rolling in the grass, their laughter echoing a freedom his supposed condition should have made impossible. Each video was a stab in the back of his charade. The knife constantly stuck in his back had magically disappeared. The man who sat in court with measured groans was the same man who now lived an active, unrestricted life. The informant's anonymity was never broken. Perhaps it was a former colleague consumed by injustice, perhaps a suspicious neighbor, or someone close who felt betrayed by the lie. The motivation didn't matter. What mattered was that the shadow had finally decided to speak, and its words were in high definition. The images on the memory card weren't just evidence. They were a parallel narrative, a double life lived in the open, meticulously dismantling the play performed in court. The investigators took their time. They turned that material into a meticulous surveillance operation. For weeks, a discreet team documented Marco Aurelio's real life. They saw him carrying bags of cement during a renovation project on his own home, lifting weights at a local gym, where he used a false name, and even participating in an amateur soccer match with friends, where he ran, jumped, and tackled with an intensity that was the antithesis of his broken man persona. Each photo, each video, was a nail in the coffin of his deception. The most compelling evidence came from an audio recording captured by one of the investigators in a cafe. Marco, sitting with a trusted friend, spoke with the relaxed, carefree voice of someone who had gotten away with it. "It was the perfect plan," he said, his voice a triumphant whisper. "That settlement was the best move of my life. They swallowed the whole story, the judge, the insurance company, everyone. Now it's just a matter of living." Those words, hovering over the images of his active life, were the confession justice needed. The trap was set. The insurance company, now with an irrefutable case of fraud, moved with the coldness of a predator. They filed a criminal complaint, and an arrest warrant was issued. The day of the arrest was choreographed with terrifying silence. There was no dramatic chase, no confrontation. Two agents simply approached him as he left the gym, sweaty and vital. The expression on his face was not one of surprise, but of resigned dread. He didn't say a word. The charade was over. The man who faked a fall had finally hit rock bottom. The courtroom, once the stage of his fraudulent triumph, now became the arena of his final humiliation. The air, once charged with manufactured sympathy, was now heavy with the silent disdain of the system he had tried to deceive. Marco Aurelio, dressed in a cheap suit that seemed to carry the weight of his lies, no longer maintained the posture of a broken man. His shoulders were hunched with genuine guilt, his eyes fixed on the ground, unable to meet the judge's gaze. The magistrate, a calm and imposing figure of authority, was the embodiment of reason and consequence. He did not shout, did not reprimand. His voice was a deep, icy river, carrying the weight of the law. The prosecution presented the case with surgical clarity. The staged accident, the performance of pain, the filmed double life, the triumphant conversation in the cafe. Each piece of evidence was a brick in an impregnable wall surrounding the defendant. The defense, without any anchor to cling to, crumbled into weak arguments and empty pleas for leniency. The crucial moment arrived when the judge handed down the sentence. He spoke not only to Marco, but to the entire system, about the cost of fraud, about the disrespect for the workers truly harmed, about the price society pays for every lie that thrives. And then he handed down the sentence. Marco Aurelio was sentenced to 5 years in federal prison. The restitution order for the $1.2 million was issued with interest. His life, built on the quicksand of lies, crumbled in an instant. The jail cell would replace the comfort of the home he had bought with dirty money. The sound of doors closing would be the new sound of his existence. Justice, slow and meticulous, had finally closed its siege. And so, Marco Aurelio's staged downfall, which began with the metallic sound of a ladder hitting concrete, ended with the much more definitive sound of a cell door locking. The man who believed he had masterminded the perfect crime, who believed he was smarter than the system, discovered the hard way that the truth has a relentless way of coming out. The final emotional twist lies not in the punishment, but in the revelation that Marco's imprisonment wasn't just about him. It was about every honest worker who will one day need the protection of insurance and will be looked upon with suspicion because people like Marco poison the well. It was about the family he shamed, the colleagues he deceived, and the community he betrayed. The sense of justice, personified in the stern figure of the judge, is not one of revenge, but of rebalancing. It is the restoration of order, the assurance that no lie, no matter how well crafted, can survive forever in the light of truth. Marco's final fall wasn't from a ladder. It was from a pedestal of lies he himself built. If this story resonates with you, comment below where you're watching and what time it is there. Is there a Marco Aurelio in your city? Someone living a double life at the expense of others? The truth is, fraud is closer than we think. Your attention is what keeps the justice system vigilant. So stay tuned, share your outrage in the comments, and don't miss the next, even more shocking case we're already preparing for you.